Greetings, night owls and brave listeners. Today we're going to dive into something dark. Something that shouldn't be spoken out loud. But hey, you came here to scare. So here we go. Trapped in a ruin that shouldn't exist. She woke to silence, not the soft quiet of a bedroom at dawn, but a silence so dense and absolute it seemed to press against her eardrums. No traffic murmuring outside the window, no tick of a clock, not even the subtle hum of electricity in the walls, just an impenetrable hush that felt somehow purposeful, heavy with meaning she could not decipher. Her body ached in a dozen small, unfamiliar ways, as if she'd slept on stone. She lay on a hard, threadbare carpet in a lifeless room. Her mind fumbled and failed in the search for context, the memory of a journey, someone else's laughter, the tang of an argument, even something as mundane as an alarm after a restless night. There was nothing. A black hole where her recollection should be. She pushed herself upright and took in her surroundings, expecting, hoping for a fragment of recognition to surface. For dusty walls stretched upward into shadows, overhead, a tarnished chandelier hung askew like a gallows ornament. The wallpaper, some faded damask pattern yellowed by age and peeling at the corners, made her skin itch. No sunlight filtered into the room, and she could make out no windows, just rectangles of gloom where she suspected doors. At first, she thought she must have drunk too much, crashed at an unfamiliar party, but when her fingers closed around a carpet burn beneath her knee, something in her chest crimped tight, frightened and irreducibly sober. Her name. She pressed her tongue to her palate, tested the word. Emily. At least she remembered that much. With a hesitant swallow, Emily rose, legs trembling, and tested each doorway. The first yielded onto a shrouded corridor, lined with sagging portraits whose faces had long since faded into anonymous smears. The second opened on an empty closet, its darkness crowding close. She peered inside, heart throbbing. Only dust and a whiff of stale something. When she tried the third door, the knob turned with a reluctant groan, but the wood stuck as if fused to the frame. No matter how she worried it, the door would not give. Emily's hands were shaking. She forced herself to stop, inhaled through her nose, exhaled through parted lips. She had woken in strange places before, college parties, her cousin's wedding, even that doomed hiking trip in Vermont. But she'd always known, at least in retrospect, how she'd arrived. This erasure, this utter, chilling blankness, tasted like a lie sliding along her teeth, like the moment in a dream when you realize something is terribly wrong, though you can't say why. Hello. Emily called, her voice ringed with false bravado. Is anyone here? The silence answered, greedy and undisturbed. Panic prickled at the edges of her reason. She blinked, willed herself to be logical. She needed an exit, not explanations. A way out, then her phone, then daylight. That was all. The rest would come. She moved into the corridor, the frayed carpet prickling under bare feet. Doors lined both sides, all closed, their brass handles dulled and etched with time. She listened at each, half hoping for any human sign, a cough, a shuffle, a whispered promise of another living soul. But the hush persisted, a velvet curtain muffling even the sound of her own breath. She tried the first door on her left, locked. The next handle spun loosely in her grip, but the door did not move. When she tried the opposite side, the hinges shuddered open, and she almost gasped, for on the other side was not a new room, but the very same parlor where she had woken, the chandelier listing overhead, the marks in the carpet from where she'd lain. A chill ran through her. She backed into the corridor, heart knocking faster. She hadn't turned around, she was sure, but perhaps disorientation and fear had tricked her into retracing her steps. She tested another door farther along. Again, it led to the same space, the faded damask wallpaper, the misshapen chandelier, and her memory, still gnawing at itself, hungry for answers. She tried not to panic. Clearly, she was unsettled, her equilibrium off. Perhaps she should sit, gather her thoughts, reconstruct her last recollection. But she could not bring herself to return to the dread-stained parlor where she'd first awoken. She squared her shoulders and stepped deeper into the hall, past chilly drafts that seemed to curl at knee-height, a peculiar chemical staleness in the air like mothballs and old, cold fire. As Emily pressed on, the corridor appeared to stretch, distend, the shadows lengthening like taffy. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, and could have sworn the portraits' faces grew more indistinct, melting further into anonymity. With every step, it became harder to recall the details of her own face. Her own features felt distant, as if she were only the idea of a person moving through the house. Behind her, something clicked, ever so softly, as if a fingernail or paw scraped against old wood. She whirled. Nothing but the darkened hallway she'd come from, immutable and still. It was only then she noticed the air's chill, and the sense, not sound, not motion, but a pressure at her back, that she was being watched. Emily forced her pulse to slow. She pressed on, biting her lips, promising herself she'd keep her wits about her, explaining away every oddity. Victims in movies never do, she thought, but I am not in a movie. I am someone who will survive. That was when she heard it, a faint, shivery whisper, too low for language, a sibilant breath at the base of her skull. It prickled through her thoughts, dissolving her resolve. She spun. Who's there? The corridor swallowed her voice, as if it had never been. A glimmer of white caught her eye in the murk, a scrap of paper, half crumpled, pinned beneath one dusty portrait. Emily hesitated, then snatched it, desperate for evidence of reason. A child's drawing, crude and frantic, a stick figure inside a square, all black lines but for a bloody red smile stretched ear to ear. Beneath it, a single word written in childish scrawl, "Stay." She dropped the paper as if it burned. Between one breath and the next, the house seemed to tilt, groaning with ancient settling, the floor shifting minutely underfoot. Emily pressed a fist to her mouth, stifling a sob, desperate not to break. She clenched her teeth, forced herself onward, deeper into the maze of doors. The corridor kinked left, then right, then spilled abruptly into a stairwell coiled around itself so tightly it seemed to burrow downward forever. No windows. No phone. Only the growing certainty that whatever had etched that red-mouthed smile had more purpose than she could allow herself to imagine. She hesitated. Listened. The breath at her nape had returned, fainter now, but closer. A shudder slithered down her spine as she placed her foot on the first step, icy with leaching warmth from her skin. The stairwell's darkness pressed in, hungry, as she forced herself down, down, the whisper following with every step, promising secrets she didn't want to know. Down the stairs, the air thickened, not with dust but with some heavier, cloying substance, thick as dread in the lungs. The hair on Emily's forearm stood to attention. The hallway above was gone, vanished as if a dream upon waking. All that remained was this spiral path downward, walls close and almost humming with the resonance of something unsaid. Each footfall was a borrowed thunder in her ears, each breath drawn through teeth aching with cold. As she descended, shapes resolved out of the gloom, a child's shoe orphaned on a step, a broken teacup slick with grime, and, every few feet, fresh scuff marks on the risers, as if someone, something, had been dragged along unwilling. At the staircase's end was a landing, lit by a bulb that guttered and fizzed overhead, its unreliable glow painting frantic shadows across the chipped floral wallpaper. The hall before her was even narrower than the last, lined with doors that seemed, impossibly, to lean inward, as if listening with keen suspicion. She moved forward, drawn by a compulsion both alien and familiar, the fear that if she stayed still, whatever pressed against her awareness would catch up, would become more than a whisper. The first door opened too easily, revealing a child's bedroom preserved in sepia. Toys crusted in silence, a wooden rocking horse nuzzling the wall, threadbare animals sitting in strict ranks. The air in the room felt bruised and old. She closed the door, sickened by the unsettling normalcy, by the way the dust motes spun too slowly in the dead air. She moved on, testing another door. This one yielded to a dim bathroom, mirror clouded, the tap dripping at intervals that seemed carefully metered, as if counting time in a room where time had long since stopped making sense. Glancing at her reflection, Emily felt off-kilter. The shape in the glass barely registered as her own, her hair limp and unfamiliar, her eyes too wide and cloudy, as though something behind her skin had begun to recede. She looked harder, willing herself to take control. Yet in the reflection's edge, just behind her left shoulder, a new detail emerged, an indistinct smear, darker than shadow, suggestive of a face partly hidden, watching. She whipped around. Nothing. Only skating silence, the oppressive press of air, the heartbeat of something hidden. Her throat was sandpaper. The urge to scream, to puncture the thick silence, tangled with the knowledge that she was still, somehow, not alone. It occurred to her that if she shouted, if anyone answered, it might be something far worse than herself. Emily backed out, closing the bathroom door with shaking fingers. From somewhere else, perhaps the child's room, perhaps another corridor entirely, came the sound of a soft, deliberate scratching. Not quite the shuffle of feet, or the scamper of a mouse, but more like the careful, probing transit of fingernails across decaying wallpaper. Her reason frayed, struggling to conjure rational explanations. Old houses creak, she reminded herself. Pipes moan, floors warp, animals nest. The mind bends noises into patterns it recognizes, a survival trick, nothing more. But even in her mounting panic, she knew she was lying to herself. This was not the sound of a house settling, but the calculated foray of an intent, patient presence. The hallway seemed to grow longer the deeper she went, doors multiplying, the air thickening until Emily felt her lungs shrinking with every breath. She tried one door, then another, but each revealed rooms that repeated themselves in maddening variation, a kitchen with plates set for three, the food petrified on the table, a laundry, mildewed and sagging, the washing machine's round-mouthed agape as if in silent scream. On a low table in the parlor, she found a purse much like her own, weathered blue leather with a scuffed, gold clasp, the kind her mother had always carried. Tentatively, she reached inside. No phone. But tucked within the lining was a faded driver's license, her own name, her own photo, but with a decade scratched off her age and an address she had never lived at. Something inside her fractured. The room pulsed, objects breathing, the air alive with the hum of unseen presence. Desperate, Emily ran. Corridors warped underfoot, her footsteps echoed impossibly behind her, as though someone else were matching her stride for stride, hounding her with invisible persistence. Flickering lights sparked to life overhead as she passed, each flaming out as her shadow crossed beneath. She chose a door at random, shoulder slamming so hard it stung. It gave way, and she stumbled forward. And found herself back in the same parlor where she'd awakened, the circle unbroken, the room unchanged save for one small altercation. On the carpet, in the precise spot where her body had lain, was now a new child's drawing. Two stick figures this time, one with wide, staring eyes, the other a black scrawl, and both inside a box. The same word as before, stay. Her scream broke at last, raw and hopeless, swallowed by the house as surely as the echo of her own running. Above, the chandelier swayed, though there was no wind. All around, the air listened, and waited.